The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever dared to challenge its authority. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the viewport of the human transport vessel as it approached Nexus Prime, the capital world of galactic civilization. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, and now humanity would finally take its place among the stars. The planet below was unlike anything she had ever seen. Massive cities floated in the clouds, connected by bridges of pure light that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Orbital stations surrounded the world like a crown of silver and gold, each one home to millions of beings from across the galaxy. "Ambassador, we have received docking clearance," Captain Rodriguez announced from behind her. His voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that Elena understood completely. "Thank you, Captain," she replied, turning away from the viewport. "Let us make history today." The human delegation consisted of 12 individuals, each selected for their expertise in diplomacy, science, and military strategy. They had trained for years, learning the customs and languages of the major galactic powers. They had studied the Council's history, its laws, and its traditions. They believed they were ready. They were wrong. The docking bay was enormous, designed to accommodate vessels from species that ranged in size from insects to giants. As the human shuttle touched down, Elena noticed that no welcoming committee awaited them. Instead, a single bureaucratic official stood with a data tablet, looking thoroughly bored. "Humans?" the official asked without looking up. He was a Velthari, a being made of woven silver threads that moved and shifted like a living tapestry. His kind had founded the Council millennia ago, and they had never let anyone forget it. "Yes, I am Ambassador Elena Vasquez, representative of the United Earth government," Elena said with a formal bow. "We are honored to be here." The Velthari made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. "Observer status, Section 47, Corridor 9. Someone will collect you eventually." And with that he walked away. Elena kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt the first spark of something cold. She had read the reports about how the Council treated new species, but reading about disrespect and experiencing it were very different things. The human delegation waited in Section 47 for 6 hours before anyone came for them. The room was bare, with no seats designed for human bodies and no refreshments offered. By the time a junior aide finally arrived to escort them to their quarters, Elena had memorized every insult and filed it away in her mind. Their quarters were small and located in the oldest part of the Citadel, far from the grand halls where important decisions were made. The walls were cracked, the lighting flickered, and the air recyclers wheezed with every breath. Other species might have complained, but Elena simply smiled and thanked their escort. "We are grateful for your hospitality," she said, and if the aide detected any sarcasm, he chose to ignore it. Over the following weeks, Elena learned how the Council truly operated. On the surface, it appeared to be a democratic body where all species had a voice. In reality, power was concentrated among a handful of ancient races who had written the rules to benefit themselves. The Velthari controlled diplomacy and law. The Kreth Confederacy dominated military matters with their massive armored warriors. The Nexari managed trade and economics, their mathematical minds calculating profit from every interaction. Together, these three powers decided the fate of the galaxy, and everyone else simply followed. Humanity had been granted observer status, which sounded impressive but meant nothing. Observers could watch the Council proceedings but could not speak unless spoken to. They could submit proposals but had no guarantee that anyone would read them. They could request meetings but could expect to wait months or years for a response. "It is a test," Elena explained to her team during one of their private meetings. "They want to see if we will accept our place at the bottom of the hierarchy." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the delegation's military advisor, shook her head in frustration. "How long are we supposed to endure this treatment, Ambassador?" "As long as necessary," Alina replied. "We are gathering intelligence, learning their weaknesses, understanding their fears. Every insult they deliver teaches us something valuable." And humanity did learn. They learned that the council species feared them. The whispers followed the human delegates everywhere they went, Deathworlders, the aliens called them, persistence predators, emotionally unstable savages from a planet so dangerous that survival itself was considered an achievement. Earth was classified as a Category 12 death world, the highest rating possible. Its gravity was crushing, its climate was chaotic, its wildlife was murderous, and its dominant species had evolved by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The fact that humans had not only survived but thrived on such a world terrified the gentle beings of the council. Alina used that fear. She made sure her delegates exercised in public, demonstrating the strength that Earth's gravity had given them. She arranged for medical examinations that showcased humanity's incredible healing abilities. She let slip information about Earth's history, the wars, the plagues, the disasters, and watched as the council species realized that nothing they could do would be worse than what humanity had already survived. "They are afraid of us," Alina reported to Earth in her weekly transmission. "They hide it behind arrogance and bureaucracy, but the fear is real. They do not want partners, they want subjects. They want to control us before we become too powerful to control." Earth's response came 3 days later, encoded in the highest security protocols available. "Continue observation," the message read. "Document everything. Make no aggressive moves. Let them believe we are tame. When the time comes, we will remind them what humanity is capable of." Alina smiled as she read the orders. She had served her government for 30 years, and she knew how to be patient. She knew how to smile while being insulted. She knew how to wait for the perfect moment. That moment was coming. In the meantime, she would play the role of the grateful newcomer, thanking the council for every scrap of attention they threw her way. She would bow and scrape, and pretend that humanity was honored to be treated like a lesser species. But every night, alone in her quarters, she added new entries to her private files, records of every slight, every insult, every injustice. One day, those files would serve a purpose. Humanity had not conquered death itself, survived ice ages and world wars, and crossed the vast emptiness between stars just to become servants of creatures who had never known true struggle. The council believed they were dealing with another primitive species, eager to join their civilization. They had no idea what was coming. 6 months had passed since humanity's arrival at Nexus Prime, and Ambassador Alina Vasquez had learned more about galactic politics than any human before her. She had watched the council debate trade agreements that took decades to finalize. She had observed military alliances formed and broken over insults that occurred centuries ago. She had studied the complex web of obligations and debts that bound the galaxy's species together in a system designed to keep the powerful in control and the weak in submission. And now, finally, humanity's waiting was over. The summons arrived at dawn, delivered by a Velthari messenger whose silver threads glowed with importance. The full council assembly had convened to announce the results of humanity's probationary evaluation. All 847 voting species would be present to witness the moment. "This is it," Alina told her team as they prepared for the assembly. "Whatever happens today, remember that we represent every human who has ever lived and every human who will ever be born. We carry the weight of our entire civilization on our shoulders." Lieutenant Commander Chen nodded grimly. "And if the terms are unacceptable?" Alina's eyes hardened. "Then we will make our position clear." The council chamber was the largest enclosed space Alina had ever seen. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with hovering platforms where delegates from hundreds of species watched and waited. The air hummed with translator fields that converted thousands of languages into something each species could understand. At the center of it all stood the speaker's platform, where the Velthari High Speaker waited in his flowing robes of woven starlight. He was ancient even by Velthari standards. His silver threads faded to pale gray, but his voice still carried the authority of 12,000 years of galactic rule. Species 848, designated humanity, please approach the central platform, the High Speaker announced, and his words echoed through the vast chamber. Alina walked forward alone, leaving her delegation behind. The journey to the central platform took several minutes, and she felt the eyes of the entire galaxy watching her every step. She kept her back straight and her expression calm, refusing to show any weakness. Ambassador Alina Vasquez, the High Speaker began, you have represented your species with adequate dignity during your probationary period. The Council has reviewed your civilization's history, capabilities, and potential. We have reached a decision regarding your membership status. Alina inclined her head respectfully. We are grateful for the Council's consideration. Humanity will be offered provisional membership in the Galactic Council, the High Speaker declared, and murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. This is a great honor, rarely bestowed upon species so young and undeveloped. You should be proud. We are honored, Alina replied, though her voice remained carefully neutral. What are the terms of this membership? The High Speaker gestured, and a massive holographic display appeared in the air between them. Text scrolled across the screen in the universal trade language, and Alina read each word with growing disbelief. First, the High Speaker announced, humanity will surrender all military vessels exceeding frigate class to the Council Defense Force. Your species has demonstrated an alarming tendency toward violence, and we cannot allow weapons of mass destruction to remain in unstable hands. Alina said nothing, but her jaw tightened. Second, humanity will submit to population controls on all colony worlds. Your species reproduces at an unsustainable rate, and the galaxy's resources must be protected for all beings. Still Alina remained silent, though her hands had curled into fists at her sides. Third, humanity will share all scientific research with the Council's Technology Oversight Committee. Your innovations are crude but potentially dangerous, and they must be properly regulated to prevent harm. The chamber was completely quiet now, every species watching the lone human standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Fourth, and finally, humanity will accept a Velthari advisory governor to oversee your solar system for a period of no less than 500 standard years. This governor will guide your development and ensure that your species integrates properly into galactic civilization. The High Speaker paused, allowing the terms to sink in. In exchange for accepting these reasonable conditions, humanity will receive one vote in Council proceedings, limited access to trade routes, and full protection under Council law. No species will be permitted to harm you without facing the combined might of galactic civilization. He spread his silver threads wide in a gesture meant to convey generosity. These terms are unprecedented for a species of your developmental stage. You should be deeply grateful for our benevolence. Alina stared at the holographic display for a long moment. She read the terms again, making absolutely certain she understood what was being offered. Then she looked up at the High Speaker with an expression that made several nearby delegates shift nervously on their platforms. Let me be certain I understand correctly, Alina said, her voice calm and cold. You want us to surrender our fleet, accept limits on our children, give away our inventions, and submit to foreign rule for 5 centuries. That is a simplistic summary, but essentially correct, the High Speaker replied. These measures are for your own protection, of course. Young species often harm themselves without proper guidance. And in exchange, we receive one vote out of 848, restricted trade access, and the privilege of not being attacked by council members. Precisely, the High Speaker said with obvious satisfaction. You understand the arrangement perfectly. Now, shall we proceed with the formal acceptance ceremony? Alina looked at the terms one more time. She thought about the 6 months of insults and delays. She thought about the fear she had seen in alien eyes whenever humans walked past. She thought about the 12,000 years of history in which the Council had crushed every species that tried to stand as equals. She thought about Earth, waiting for her answer. No, she said. The word was quiet, almost gentle, but it struck the chamber like a thunderbolt. Translator systems flickered and reset, certain they had malfunctioned. Delegates leaned forward on their platforms, unable to believe what they had heard. The High Speaker's silver threads went rigid with shock. I beg your pardon. No, Alina repeated, louder this time. Humanity rejects these terms, all of them, completely and without reservation. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council fell absolutely silent. Every being in the chamber stared at the small human woman who had just done the unthinkable. They had offered her civilization a place in the greatest alliance the galaxy had ever known, and she had refused. The High Speaker recovered first, his threads rippling with what might have been anger or disbelief. Perhaps the translator has malfunctioned. These terms are generous beyond measure. No species in history has received such a favorable offer. Alina smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The translator is working perfectly. My answer is no. Humanity will not surrender its fleet, its freedom, its future, or its dignity. Not today, not ever. The chamber erupted in chaos, and Alina stood at its center, unmoved by the storm she had unleashed. This was only the beginning. The chaos in the council chamber was unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed in thousands of years. Delegates screamed in frequencies that human ears could not detect. Platforms collided as species rushed to get a better view of the human who had dared to say no. The Kreth Confederacy's representative, a massive armored insectoid standing 3 meters tall, rose from his seat and bellowed so loudly that the translator systems overloaded. Ambassador Alina Vasquez stood perfectly still at the center of the storm, her hands clasped behind her back, her expression calm and patient. She had expected this reaction, and she was prepared to wait as long as necessary. The Velthari High Speaker raised his silver threads and called for order. It took nearly 10 minutes for the chamber to quiet down, and even then, the air crackled with tension and barely contained outrage. Ambassador Vasquez, the High Speaker said, his voice carrying an edge that had not been there before, perhaps you do not fully understand your position. Your species is young and inexperienced. You cannot possibly comprehend the complexities of galactic politics. I understand perfectly, Alina replied. You have made your intentions quite clear. Then you must understand that rejection is not an option, the High Speaker continued. The Council does not make offers twice. Either you accept these terms, or your species will be declared hostile and treated accordingly. A ripple of agreement passed through the chamber. Several species made sounds that their translators converted into words like dangerous and uncontrollable, and must be contained. Alina listened to their fear and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had hoped, despite everything, that the Council might prove to be different from what her reports suggested. She had hoped that galactic civilization might welcome humanity as partners rather than subjects. That hope was dead now. High Speaker, Alina said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber, I would like to address the full assembly before we proceed any further. The High Speaker hesitated. Allowing a rejected species to speak was highly irregular, but denying the request might make the Council appear afraid. After a moment of consideration, he gestured for her to continue. Thank you, Alina said, and she activated her own holographic display. Data flooded the chamber's screens, overwhelming the Council's systems with information that humanity had spent 6 months gathering. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Council has claimed to represent peace and cooperation among the stars, Alina began. For 12,000 years, you have told young species that membership in your alliance is an honor and a privilege. For 12,000 years, you have lied. Outraged protests erupted from 100 platforms, but Alina continued speaking, her voice cutting through the noise. The Draenari were granted provisional membership 6,000 years ago, she said, and images of a broken species appeared on the screens. They are still waiting for full voting rights. Their homeworld is strip-mined for resources they never see, and their population is a fraction of what it once was. That is an internal matter, a Nixari delegate shouted, but Alina ignored him. The Hollow Ones had their shipyards seized 800 years ago for safety purposes, she continued, displaying records that the Council had tried to bury. Those shipyards have never been returned. The Hollow Ones now serve as manual laborers on worlds they once helped build. Ancient history, the Kreth representative growled, but his mandibles clicked nervously. 17 species have been relocated from resource-rich systems, Alina pressed on. 43 species have had their populations regulated into near extinction. Over 200 species have been denied membership entirely and left to struggle alone in the darkness between stars. She let the data speak for itself, watching as delegates throughout the chamber began to shift uncomfortably. Many of them had suspected these truths, but had never seen them compiled so comprehensively. You do not want partners, Alina declared, her voice ringing with conviction. You want subjects, you want slaves, you want species who will bow down and accept whatever scraps you choose to throw them. That is what your generous terms truly mean. The High Speaker's threads had turned dark with anger. You speak of matters you do not understand, human. The Council maintains stability. Without our guidance, the galaxy would descend into chaos and war. Your kind of stability is just another word for control, Alina shot back. You keep species weak so they cannot challenge you. You divide them so they cannot unite against you. You have built an empire of fear and called it civilization. Enough, the Kreth representative roared. This creature insults the Council with every breath. I demand that she be silenced and her species punished for this outrage. Voices rose in agreement from platforms throughout the chamber. The atmosphere had shifted from shock to anger, and Alina could feel the weight of galactic hatred pressing down upon her. But she had one more thing to say. Humanity did not crawl out of the ice ages, survive extinction events, outlast plagues and famines, endure world wars, and cross the vast emptiness between stars to become servants of creatures who have never known true struggle, Alina declared, and her voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of human history. We come from a world where the weak die and the strong survive. We come from a world where giving up means death. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day, and we conquered it. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had ruled the galaxy since before humanity discovered fire. You are afraid of us, she said simply. You should be. Alina turned to face the High Speaker directly. Humanity withdraws its application for Council membership. We withdraw from these talks entirely. We will find our own path among the stars, and we will remember how we were treated here. She began to walk toward the exit, and her delegation fell into step behind her. 12 humans moved through the vast chamber, surrounded by hundreds of hostile species, and not one of them showed the slightest fear. You cannot simply leave, the High Speaker called after her. No species has ever walked out of Council proceedings. This is unprecedented. Alina paused at the chamber doors and looked back over her shoulder. Then, let this be the first of many precedents humanity sets. And with those words, she walked out. The doors sealed behind the human delegation, and the council chamber exploded into chaos once more. Species that had been enemies for centuries suddenly found common ground in their outrage. The High Speaker called for emergency sessions to discuss the human problem. But outside, in the cold corridors of the Citadel, Elena allowed herself a small smile. The council had made their choice, and now humanity would make theirs. Earth was waiting, and Earth would know exactly how to respond. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you underestimated the species from the Death World. The first reaction from the Galactic Council was exactly what Ambassador Elena Vasquez had predicted: mockery and contempt. "Let them go," the Velthari High Speaker declared in his official statement. "One small species controlling a handful of primitive worlds cannot possibly threaten the combined might of galactic civilization. They will return within a year, begging for the terms they so foolishly rejected." The Kreth Confederacy was more direct. Their war minister announced that humanity would be crushed like insects if they ever dared to threaten council interests. His statement was broadcast across 1,000 worlds and received enthusiastic support. Economic sanctions followed immediately. Human merchants were barred from all council stations. Human ships were denied refueling rights at council ports. Human colonists were forbidden from purchasing supplies through council trade networks. The message was clear: submit or starve. But humanity did neither. For 2 years, Earth went completely silent. No diplomatic communications were sent. No trade requests were filed. No complaints were registered. The human delegation simply vanished from galactic society, and the council assumed they had retreated to their homeworld to suffer. The reality was very different. Elena Vasquez had returned to Earth with her comprehensive files on council operations, and the United Earth government had studied every detail. They had learned exactly how the council maintained control, and exactly where that control was weakest. "The council's power depends on isolation," Elena explained to the military commanders and political leaders assembled in Geneva. "They keep species separated and afraid. They make everyone believe that the council is the only path to survival. But there are others out there who have been pushed aside, forgotten, abandoned." "The exiled races," Admiral Chen said, studying the star maps that Elena had compiled. "Species the council rejected or expelled over the millennia." "Exactly," Elena confirmed. "The Drenari, the Hollow Ones, the Scorned of Kitharis, and dozens more. They survive on the edges of council space, struggling alone because they were told they had no other choice." "And you believe they would ally with us?" President Martinez asked. Elena smiled. "I believe they have been waiting for someone to ask." Operation Lighthouse began 3 months later. Human vessels, disguised as simple merchant ships, began exploring the regions beyond council borders. They carried no weapons, only supplies, medicine, and a message of friendship. The first contact was with the Hollow Ones, a species of living crystal that the council had stripped of their shipyard centuries ago. They were suspicious at first, expecting another trap from their old enemies. But the humans came with open hands and honest words. "We are not here to conquer or control," the human ambassador told them. "We are here to offer partnership, true partnership between equals." The Hollow Ones had forgotten what equality felt like, but they were willing to learn again. Word spread through the forgotten reaches of the galaxy. The humans were different. The humans did not demand submission. The humans actually listened. Within a year, humanity had made contact with 14 exiled species. Within 2 years, that number had grown to 37. Each one had been broken by the council in some way, and each one burned with the desire for justice. The Free People's Compact was born in a hidden station orbiting a nameless star. Representatives from 37 species gathered to sign a charter that promised mutual defense, free trade, and absolute equality. There would be no ruling class, no subject races, no masters and servants. Elena Vasquez stood beside James Okonkwo, the newly elected Secretary General of the Compact, as the charter was ratified. Tears streamed down her face as she watched species who had been enemies learn to shake hands. "This is just the beginning," James told her. "The Council will not ignore us forever." "Let them come," Elena replied. "We will be ready." And they were. The exiled species brought ancient knowledge that humanity eagerly absorbed. The Hollow Ones taught human engineers how to build ships that could fold space itself. The Drenari shared biological sciences that made human medicine seem primitive. The Scorned of Kitharis revealed secrets of energy manipulation that revolutionized human technology. In return, humanity offered something that no other species possessed: the stubborn, relentless creativity of minds forged on a death world. Human scientists took alien knowledge and improved it in ways that astonished their new allies. Human engineers built hybrid technologies that neither species could have created alone. The Compact's combined fleet grew from a handful of salvaged vessels to a navy that rivaled the Council's forward forces. Shipyards hidden in nebulae-produced warships designed by human tacticians and built with alien precision. Weapons that the Council had never seen emerged from secret laboratories. When Council intelligence finally discovered what was happening, panic spread through the halls of power. "This is impossible," the High Speaker declared when he received the reports. "The humans were supposed to be isolated and weak. How have they built an alliance of this magnitude in only 5 years?" The answer was simple. Humanity had offered something the Council never had: respect. Every species in the Compact was treated as an equal, regardless of their size or strength. Every voice was heard. Every contribution was valued. For beings who had spent centuries being told they were worthless, this simple dignity was worth more than all the resources in the galaxy. The Council demanded an emergency session to address the human threat. War hawks from a dozen species called for immediate military action. The Kreth Confederacy mobilized its fleet and prepared for invasion. But the Compact was ready. Secretary General Okonkwo broadcast his response across every communication frequency in the galaxy. His message reached Council citizens who had never questioned their government and exiled beings who had lost all hope. "You offered us chains and called them gifts," James declared, his voice calm and strong. "We rejected your offer and found better friends. Now you will deal with us as equals, or you will not deal with us at all." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "The Free People's Compact does not seek war, but we will not flee from it. We do not wish to destroy the Council, but we will defend ourselves against any aggression. The choice is yours." Across the galaxy, beings who had accepted Council rule for generations began to wonder if there might be another way. Seeds of doubt took root in minds that had never questioned before. The old order was cracking, and humanity stood at the heart of the storm. War seemed inevitable, but Elena Vasquez had learned something important during her time among the stars. The Council was designed for politics, not combat. When faced with an enemy that actually wanted to fight, the ancient powers might discover that their empire was built on sand. The galaxy held its breath and waited. War never came. For all their threats and posturing, the Galactic Council discovered that they had no appetite for true conflict. Their civilization was built on bureaucracy and trade agreements, not battle and bloodshed. When faced with an enemy that had been forged in the fires of constant struggle, the ancient powers found their courage wanting. The Kreth Confederacy's fleet advanced to the border of Compact space and stopped there. Their war minister demanded action, but his commanders reported that the enemy vessels were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Human tactics, combined with alien technology, had produced weapons that even the mighty Kreth feared to face. The Velthari High Speaker called for diplomatic solutions while secretly hoping that someone else would solve the problem for him. The Nexari calculated the costs of total war and determined that victory would destroy the galactic economy. Smaller council species began to question whether the human threat was really worth fighting. Months passed, then years. The standoff continued, with neither side willing to strike the first blow. Meanwhile, the Free People's Compact grew stronger with every passing day. Species that had been loyal council members for centuries began to ask uncomfortable questions. If the humans and their allies were truly dangerous savages, why had the council not destroyed them? If the council was truly powerful, why were they afraid to fight? Defections started slowly at first. A trading guild here, a minor species there. But as word spread about how the compact treated its members, the trickle became a flood. Within 3 years, 47 more species had abandoned the council and joined the Alliance of Free Peoples. The High Speaker watched his empire crumble and finally understood that force alone could not save it. "We must negotiate," he announced to a council that was now missing nearly a third of its original members. "The alternative is destruction." The talks were held on neutral ground, a station that human engineers and Hollow One architects had built together, orbiting a star that belonged to no one. It was a symbol of everything the compact represented: cooperation between equals, creation instead of conquest. Ambassador Elena Vasquez led the compact delegation. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes still burned with the fire that had carried her through decades of struggle. Beside her walked Secretary General James Okonkwo and representatives from 100 allied species. The High Speaker arrived with a much smaller entourage. Age had dimmed his silver threads, and the weight of failure hung heavy on his ancient form. He looked at the station around him and saw the future that the council had tried so hard to prevent. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said as they sat down at the negotiating table, "it seems you have achieved everything you set out to do." "Not everything," Elena replied. "There is still much work to be done." The High Speaker made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. "We offered you a place in our civilization, and you chose to tear that civilization apart instead. Are you satisfied with the chaos you have created?" Elena shook her head. "We did not create chaos. We created choice. For the first time in 12,000 years, species can decide their own destinies without asking permission from masters who see them as nothing but resources to be exploited." "And you believe this is better?" the High Speaker demanded. "Without the Council to maintain order, the galaxy will descend into war and suffering." "Perhaps," Elena admitted. "Freedom is dangerous. It always has been. But slavery is worse, even when the chains are made of silk and the cage is painted gold." The negotiations lasted for weeks. Every detail was argued and debated. The High Speaker fought for every scrap of power he could retain, but the reality was unavoidable. The old council was finished. In its place, a new alliance would rise. The Galactic Union would operate on principles that humanity had brought to the stars: equality, cooperation, mutual respect. Every species would have an equal voice. No one would be designated as provisional or observer. No one would be forced to surrender their fleet or their freedom. "You have won," the High Speaker said as the final agreements were signed. "But I wonder if you truly understand what you have done. The Council maintained stability for 12 millennia. Your union is an experiment that could fail at any moment." James Okonkwo answered for the compact. "Every civilization is an experiment. The question is whether you have the courage to try new things or whether you cling to the old ways simply because they are familiar. Humanity chose to try, and we invite everyone to try with us." The High Speaker looked at the human who had helped reshape the galaxy. "Your species adapts too quickly. You form bonds too easily. You look at the impossible and simply do it. We were right to fear you." Alina smiled. Fear can be useful. It can warn you of danger, but it can also blind you to opportunity. You feared what we might become, so you tried to chain us. If you had trusted us instead, we might have been your greatest allies from the beginning. Perhaps, the High Speaker admitted, but the past cannot be changed. Only the future remains. "Then let us build that future together," Alina said, and she extended her hand, a human gesture that had become famous throughout the galaxy. The High Speaker hesitated. His silver threads, faded with age and dimmed by defeat, seemed to gather themselves for one final effort. Then, slowly, they reached out and wrapped around Alina's fingers. The watching delegates erupted in cheers and applause. Species that had been enemies for millennia embraced like old friends. The galaxy had not known such hope in 12,000 years. In the histories written afterward, scholars would mark this moment as the end of one era and the beginning of another. The Galactic Council, which had ruled through fear and control, had given way to something new, a union built on the radical idea that all beings deserved respect. And at the center of it all stood humanity, the species from the death world, the persistent predators, the emotionally unstable savages who had refused to accept their place at the bottom. Alina Vasquez looked out at the galaxy she had helped transform and felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. She had served her people well, and now new generations would carry the work forward. Humanity had walked out of the Council's talks because they refused to kneel. And then they had built a better table, where everyone could sit as equals. The stars belonged to everyone now, and the future was bright with possibility. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not weapons or conquest, but hope. And hope, as the old council had learned too late, was the most powerful force in the universe.